Thank you, Chairman Moran and Ranking Member Blumenthal and members of the committee for inviting me to testify this afternoon. And thank you, too, for your efforts to highlight the failures of the U.S. Olympic Committee and others to prevent and stop the sexual abuse of our young athletes. On January 24th, USA Gymnastics Dr. Larry Nassar was sentenced to up to 175 years in prison. It was a cathartic moment for Nassar's victims and for the nation, but it was a moment of only partial justice because not all of the organizations and individuals responsible for predatory acts against our young athletes have been held to account. Because the U.S. Olympic Committee operates under a federal charter and its athletes compete under the American flag, I believe strongly that the Senate has a responsibility to investigate the allegations of abuse brought forward by these athletes and any other misconduct on the part of USOC and the national governing bodies. That's why I joined with Senator Joni Ernst on a resolution to establish a Senate special committee to provide an independent and comprehensive inquiry into what has been called the worst sex abuse scandal in the history of sports. It's also why I so appreciate the important work that is being done by this committee to ensure that the individuals who enabled these horrible crimes are held accountable and that safeguards are put in place to protect our Olympic and amateur athletes. In January, as she said, Senator Ernst and I had the privilege of meeting 3 of the women who courageously testified at Nassar's sentencing hearing. We thanked these impressive women for speaking out and advocating for reforms to protect young athletes from abuse. In turn, they stressed to us the importance of exposing the full scope of the sex abuse scandal at USOC and other organizations. Congress must be resolved not to fail these women the way so many officials have failed them in the past. Olympic and amateur athletes represent a particularly vulnerable population for this sexual abuse. The intensely competitive nature of the sports in which they participate, and often begin at a young age, creates an environment that individuals such as Larry Nassar are able to exploit. USOC abdicated its responsibility to ensure the safety of these young athletes, and the organization continues to be less than forthcoming in exposing past abuses. USOC, USA Gymnastics, and others must be held accountable and their failures brought to light. The fact that there were good people working at USOC only underscores the need to account for these failures. The Larry Nassar scandal has brought to light disturbing allegations of sexual abuse that extend beyond just one man and implicate individuals in sports including taekwondo, speed skating, swimming, and cycling. Since Nassar's conviction, we've also seen reports indicating that in many respects, USOC's priorities are at odds with those of its athletes. USOC's financials show an organization that generates nearly $340 million in revenue, but in 2016 gave a meager 8% of those revenues directly to athletes. While our Olympic athletes receive just a small fraction of these revenues, USOC has managed to spend about $6 million on its top executives, including a salary of close to $1 million for its CEO, and to pay 129 employees there $100,000 or more a year. These exorbitant executive salaries and a bloated budget exist at the same time that athletes have had to sue the U.S. Olympic Committee for adequate compensation and run their own GoFundMe campaigns to get to the Olympics. This suggests an organization that has lost sight of its core mission. These reports, along with the more heinous allegations of sexual abuse, make it difficult to understand why Congress is sanctioning such a flawed entity that has failed so many of our athletes. It is clear that USOC is not fulfilling its core mission to support and protect our Olympic athletes, and I believe Congress should consider revoking or rewriting USOC's charter to include more oversight. The new charter should state clearly that any future scandals will result in USOC losing its charter and its tax-exempt status. That new charter should also require USOC to give 50% of its revenues directly to athletes and teams. Again, I want to reiterate that I appreciate the work that this committee and others are doing on this issue, and I hope that your efforts will help to ensure the safety and security of Olympic athletes now and in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.